wanna save money on the best tech. Value Tech Sense. Value Tech Sense.
Welcome to another video. Welcome to another video. Right. In this video, we're going to talk about something that I get asked in the comments section a lot. What is the best TV for the next gen consoles? All right. Now, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. This is Value Tech Sense, where I show you how to get the best tech for the best prices and how not to get finessed. All right. So if you're new here, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, go down to the link in the description. I did a video called 60 Hertz versus 120 Hertz. I talked about this months ago. All of my OGs in the comments section that's already seen this video already know my stance on the best TV for the next gen consoles. But if you're new here, I suggest you go into the description and watch that video. All right. But by the end of this video, you will know the best TV for the next gen consoles. All right. The very best TV to get and the TV not to get. All right. Some of y'all probably already got a TV perfect for next gen consoles and don't even know it. All right. So we're going to dive into it in this video. Now, dealing with next gen consoles and what to expect from next gen consoles. One thing that you need to understand is gaming. All right. Gaming technology and where gaming is as it stands today. All right. There's a lot of people out there putting out videos about this TV, that TV, this TV has this TV has that. But at the same time, what are these consoles going to offer you to make you go out here and buy a whole nother TV to go with a console? Right. A lot of y'all out here feel like y'all got to buy a new console and a new TV. And in most cases, that's not even the case, man. It's just a bunch of finesse. All right. So by the end of this video, we're going to get into all of that. You will know exactly the TV that you will need to support your next gen console. All right. So one of the main things that you need to know, about the next gen consoles is what they will support. All right, what they will support. And you really need to educate yourself on the gaming industry and the gaming technology as it stands today to give you a better understanding of where it's heading. So in order for me to break this down to you so you fully understand it, all right, I'm going to try to break it down in simple terms. That way, no matter what level you're on with your gaming technology, you'll fully understand what I'm trying to say to you. And if you make it to the end of this video, I am going to show you, I am going to give you an example of what the next gen gaming will actually look like. I'm going to show you that in this video, what you can expect from next gen gaming. I'm going to show you exactly what that's going to look like. All right. But enough with the little intros, man. Let's get into it. All right, we're just gonna hop online and I am going to let's see right here. Let me explain some things to y'all, all right, about gaming and console gaming as it is today. All right, let's talk about 4K resolution. All right, 4K resolution on home screens is 3840 by 2160 pixels. All right, this is native 4K resolution. All right, your Xbox One X is capable of this. All right, HDR means high dynamic range. Basically improves the color range of an image, so blacks are blacker, tones are stronger, and so on. All right, this is HDR. If you have a new TV or if you've been looking at TVs and TV reviews, you should know what 4K and HDR are. All right. Now, FPS stands for frames per second. All right. I want y'all to pay attention to this. Most games hit 30 FPS now, with 60 FPS being the gold standard to aim for. All right. It's worth noting that when frame rates are noticed and discussed, it's usually because they're changing or unstable, not necessarily because they're lower. All right, FPS. Now we're going to get into FPS and refresh rate and how they relate to one another. But as far as frames per second, all right, your frames per second is if you have a game and it's displaying a certain amount of frames, right? Most of your games are displaying 30 FPS and 60 FPS as far as frames. When you start getting to refresh rate like 60 hertz or 120 hertz, your refresh rate is how many times how your display is, how many times it's refreshing itself. Okay, so you can have 120 hertz display and you can be playing a game that's 30 FPS. I don't care if you have 120 hertz display. If the game is displaying 30 FPS, that's all you're gonna see is 30 FPS. All right. Checkerboard rendering is a way of essentially splitting a screen image into a tiny grid and only rendering every other square. A filter then reconstructs the missing parts to create the target resolution, using less processing power as a result. It's practically indistinguishable to the human eye, but technically not true 4K. All right, checkerboard rendering. This is your PS4 Pro right now. All right, your Xbox One X can display 2160p native 4K. The PS4 Pro uses checkerboard rendering to give you this 4K or fake 4K. But as far as you being able to tell the difference with the human eye, it's very hard to do, okay, unless you're looking at it through a microscope. But you have native 4K, which is your Xbox One X right now, and checkerboard rendering is being used by your PS4 Pro. Now let's get to dynamic scaling and resolution. All right, these are all console gaming. Dynamic scaling and resolution means that the game varies the resolution it renders at, usually depending on the processing power needed at any given moment. All right. This doesn't always affect the output resolution, as things can be scaled up. So roughly speaking, a 4K game might render a 2K image when things are quiet and upscale to 4K, but drop to lower render resolution, still upscale to 4K when a lot is happening on screen, explosions, loads of enemies, etc. All right, so basically dynamic scaling, dynamic resolution. All right, so say I'm a game developer, right? And I want to create a game that hits 60 FPS in 4K. All right. So by using dynamic resolution and dynamic scaling, it's a technique to where I want to keep a steady 60 FPS frame rate. But when there's a lot happening on the screen, my 2160p, I might dip it down to 1800p when something happens on screen, like an explosion or something like that. But it keeps the frame rate up to keep the gameplay smooth, right? But the instead of the FPS taking dips in frames, the resolution takes dips, and those are harder to notice, right? If you're playing a game and it's having frame dips because it's losing frames, that's much more easy to notice and more distracting than the resolution taking dips. Those things are harder to notice. And all of these, the Xbox and the PS4, they all use this type of technique when they're trying to create a game and give you a smooth gaming experience, also with the 4K resolution or the checkerboarded 4K resolution. The point is for you to have the best visuals and the best performance. All right, so I had to break this down to you, and you have to understand these things right here to understand where gaming is and where it's going. Okay, so this video is not going to be short. As you can see, I really want to break this down to y'all. This is one of the videos where if you really want to save money, if you really don't want to go out there and just be wasting your money on something that you don't need, based off of a bunch of marketing and stuff that's being thrown at you and things that you don't understand, this is the video for you. All right, in this video I'm gonna break all of this down to you, how it applies to next gen consoles, all right, and how it's gonna apply to your display that you may have. All right, and at the end of the video I'm gonna move over to the gaming system and I'm gonna show you next gen what to expect from these next gen consoles, in my opinion. All right, so a brief review before we move on, because these are some things that you need to understand moving on, so you'll understand as we progress throughout the video, so you'll know exactly where gaming is and exactly where gaming is going, so you'll know what type of TV you'll need for the next gen consoles. All right, so brief review: 4K resolution is native 4K HDR. We all know that's high dynamic range, frames per second, which is very important. This is basically going to be the topic of the discussion today. Is we're going to be talking about FPS and the games that will be coming out and that are available and will be coming available for next gen consoles. Checkerboard rendering, that's 4K, and dynamic scaling or resolution is a technique of basically taking the resolution and dipping it down, dipping it up, having it to vary to keep your performance steady. All right, that's dynamic scaling. So let's talk about frames per second and how it relates to refresh rates. All right, as it says here, most games hit 30 FPS and 60 FPS. Now, I don't know if y'all remember this, but all right, on the Xbox One X, I don't know if y'all remember this, but I'm gonna remind you. This is an article from 2018. Xbox One X 120 Hz support. Everything you need to know. All right, 120 Hz support. All right, so I have an Xbox One X. It supports 120 Hz, but as I was just explaining to you, even though it supports 120 Hz, even though you might have a TV that supports 120 Hz, if you don't have a game, right, with 120 frames or 80 frames, right, you're not gonna see the benefits of having 120 Hz. But let's just see what this article says. All right, extra frames for all, Xbox One. All right, here we go. Xbox One picks up support for high refresh rates among a variety of features. Let's get this ad out of here. Under the Xbox May update, all right, 2018 update, expanding upon the console's video capabilities. The feature promises smoother gameplay across supported titles. You get that? The feature promises smoother gameplay across supported titles. We wrapped up everything you need to know about the feature and how to use it. All right. What 120 Hz means for you and your Xbox. The refresh rate of your display refers to how many times per second the screen refreshes its image. It's measured in hertz, and the higher the number, the more times per second your TV or monitor refreshes. With higher refresh rate comes smoother gameplay and potentially reduced reaction times, making for an improved gaming experience. All right, getting into refresh rates. Now let's see how that correlates with FPS. All right. It says Xbox One has now gained support for high refresh rates, supporting up to 120 Hz signal on compatible displays. This lifts the previously imposed limits of 60 Hz on console. All right. Once enabled, your console will see benefits across certain software. To take advantage of a 120 Hz, you need an Xbox One X or One S running the Xbox May 2018 update. This update is currently limited to a subset of users enrolled in the Xbox Insider program. Everybody has it now. This is a 2018 article ahead of a wider release set for the upcoming weeks. All right. Your Xbox must be connected to a compatible TV or monitor which supports refresh rates over 60 Hz. High refresh rates must be supported by HDMI 2.0. Blah, 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 blah. Let's get to the point of what I want to show you, which is right here. All right. Even with the feature, don't expect system-wide improvements. All right, we're talking about 120 Hz support on your Xbox One X and having a display that supports 120 Hz. But even with the feature, don't expect system-wide improvements. Many Xbox One titles are developed and hard-coded frame rate limits set between 30 Hz and 60 Hz. While some games are developed with uncapped frame rates, expect many games to see no changes. We recommend researching your favorite titles for details on frame rate settings. All right, 30 Hz, 60 Hz. Let's slide back over here. Most games hit 30 FPS. 60 FPS is the gold standard. All right, so even though we've had 120 Hz support on the Xbox One X since 2018, how many games support 1440p at 120 Hz? I'll wait. Go on your internet, Google it. Show me one single game on the Xbox One X that hits above 60 FPS that could take advantage of a refresh rate above 60 Hz. I will wait. All right. So basically, everybody out here right now is feeling like, oh man, 120 FPS gaming is coming to Xbox. It's coming to the PlayStation 5. I need to get a new TV. Hold up, G. Hold on a second. Let's go over here to, what's this say right here? Guide. PS5 enhanced games list. Every PS4, PS5 game with enhanced graphic modes. October 16th, 2020. Let's get into it. All right. You want to know what to expect from your PS5 when it gets enhanced? Let's go over it. Assassin's Creed Valhalla will run native 4K resolution at 60 FPS. 60 FPS. 60 FPS. 60 Hz. All right. Everybody I need this 120 Hz. But you're gaming on console. All right. People that play on PC, they have options to play at higher frame rates. But consoles are, as of now, have been capped at 60 FPS. But let's look at the PS5. All right. This game right here, dynamic 4K. Now, that's why I wanted to go ahead and explain that to y'all at the beginning, so y'all understand what these things mean. Dynamic 4K at 60 FPS. So you will be getting 60 FPS, even though it won't run native 4K. You will have the dynamic 4K where your resolution will take dips to support the performance of 60 FPS, which will run perfectly on a 60 Hz television. Borderlands 3 will run native 4K resolution at 60 FPS. All right. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War supports 4K 60 with limited ray tracing. Also supports 120 FPS at lower resolution. No 4K 120 FPS. Maybe this will be 1440p. Maybe this will be 1080p. Who knows? We don't know yet. But the gold standard is 60 FPS. Demon Souls, 60 FPS at 1440p with ray tracing, 30 FPS at native 4K with ray tracing. Destiny 2, 4K resolution, 60 FPS, 60 Hz. All right. Devil May Cry Special Edition supports 120 FPS at a dynamic 1080p. Okay, so you're talking about 1080p resolution taking dips below 1080p to support 120 FPS. But you could run 4K at 30 FPS with ray tracing, 1440p at 60 FPS with ray tracing. All right. Dirt 5 supports 120 FPS at 1080p, 4K at 30 FPS, 1440p at 60 FPS. All right. Now, not to go through this list no slower, but you can see the trend here. 4K 60, 60, 60, dynamic 60, 60. All right, 60. 4K resolution at 60 FPS. Enhanced graphic modes locked at 30 FPS. 30 FPS. All right, 60 FPS, 1440p, 60 FPS. Now you got some games in here sprinkled in, supports 120 frames at native 4K. But ask yourself, is it really worth you going out, buying a brand new console and spending hundreds of dollars on a new TV to support a sprinkled in 120 FPS? Because you might get 1 or 2 games that support it, 1 or 3 games, when the main thing that you will be experiencing and the main thing that is going to be aimed for is 60 FPS, which is actually just phenomenal. Okay, 4K, really native 4K resolution with HDR at 60 FPS. That's going to be an amazing gaming experience for you. But all of y'all getting sold into this 120 FPS, thinking you're going to get 4K HDR 120 FPS, though, that's a pipe dream, man. That's a pipe dream. 4K 60, native resolution 60 FPS, 4K 60. All right, supports 120 FPS at lower resolution. Y'all want to look at the Xbox Series X? Let's get into it. List of Xbox Series X optimized games. Let's give my computer a little time to catch up, as it's moving a little slow right now. Let's wake it back up. There we go. All right, so we on the move. List of Xbox Series X games optimized 4K 120 FPS ray tracing. Let's get into it. All right, this is list of Xbox Series X optimized games. What are we looking at? HDR 60 FPS, 4K 60 FPS, 4K 60 FPS, 4K 60 FPS. These are unknown. We don't know what these are going to be yet. 4K 60 FPS. Now this, even though it's not as detailed, but it says 4K HDR 120 FPS. Now, if the Xbox can pull this off, it doesn't say dynamic. If this right here would be next gen as far as exceeding 4K 60. You're talking about 4K HDR 120 frames with ray tracing. Now this game right here is going to be the one that will show you if these consoles are in fact capable of doing this. Even though on the PS5 side, for the same game, right? For the same game, where we at? Call of Duty, it supports 4K 60 with limited ray tracing, but also supports 120 FPS at a lower resolution. This will let you know that the Xbox Series X will be more powerful than the PS5, because according to this list, the exact same game will be 4K HDR 120 frames per second with ray tracing. All right. So if you want to go out there and spend hundreds of dollars on a brand new TV just to play one console game with this, be my guest, man. It's your choice. I'm just showing you I wouldn't do it. All right. 4K HDR 60 FPS, native 4K, no dynamic resolution, but native 4K 60 with ray tracing at 60 FPS HDR. That is enough for anybody to have an awesome major gaming experience. Okay, this right here is overkill, but we will see how this We'll see how it does. Nobody knows how this is going to do yet, but as you can see, the main theme of next gen is 4K HDR, 60 FPS, 60 FPS. These we don't know. 60 FPS. You got your 120 hertz stuff sprinkled in, but if you look right here on the actual breakdown, it will run 4K on the Xbox Series X, HDR 60 FPS, and it will run 1080p on the Xbox Series S. Destiny 2, if you get the Series S, you're going to be running 1080p at 60 FPS. All right. If you get the Series X, you'll be able to run 4K at 60 FPS. But my question is, what happened to this? Microsoft, can I get 1440p at 60 FPS on my Xbox One X? Or y'all gonna make me buy a new console? Because we was promised 1440p at 120 hertz on the Xbox One X, and I've yet to see one single title that supports it. Can we get an upgrade to some games for our Xbox One X, 1440p at 60 FPS on the Xbox One X? All right. Devil May Cry, 1080p to 4K on Xbox Series X. So basically, when I see 1080p, I'm thinking, or I'm seeing 1080p will be supported by 120 FPS and 4K will be supported by 30 FPS. Otherwise, it wouldn't be no point in even putting the 1080p over here. All right, 4K on the Xbox Series X at 60 FPS to 120 FPS. All right, that Dirt 5. 60 to 120. So is this 4K 60 and 4K 120, or is it 4K dynamic 120, or is it, I mean, what is it? We don't know yet. We don't know. But on the Xbox Series S, it supports 1440p 60 FPS on the Xbox Series S. Again, Microsoft, 1440p 60 FPS. What happened to the Xbox update from 2018, Xbox One 120 hertz support, everything you need to know? All right, so the Xbox supports it, but it's up to the game developers to support it. It's up to the game developers to create the game to take advantage of the hardware. All right, Xbox One X can do 120 hertz at 1440p. Can we get 1440p 60 FPS on the Xbox One X? So y'all gonna make me buy a new console? "4K 60 FPS, 4K 60 FPS. This game is 4K 120, but you can see what I'm getting at in this video. 60, 60, 60. Here's your 120 for Gears. Now this Gears 5 it says 4K HDR 120 FPS with ray tracing. All right, so that's gonna be an amazing game. But again, is it worth it to you to go out and buy a brand new TV, right, for 3 or 4 games? Now let's go down here where it says in the article, and I'm going to close this out so I can show y'all exactly what to expect from your next gen consoles. I'm going to show you exactly what that's going to look like. All right, what's the difference between 60 FPS and 120 FPS? The Xbox Series X puts a notable focus on higher frame rates, enabled by upgrades to hardware. The number of frames displayed over a certain period directly relates to the fluidity of gameplay, measured in frames per second, with higher frame rates enabling smoother experiences. For example, while many Xbox One games run at 30 FPS, some push to 60 FPS in pursuit of fluid gameplay. While the Xbox One supports 60 FPS and beyond, many games fail to push beyond 30 FPS due to hardware limitations. The Xbox Series X alleviates several bottlenecks, with Microsoft suggesting 4K resolution and 60 FPS will emerge as a common baseline for the next generation. All right, the Xbox Series X next gen alleviates several bottlenecks, with Microsoft suggesting 4K resolution and 60 FPS will emerge as a common baseline for the next generation. Many Xbox Series X optimized titles also pursue 120 FPS, enabling previously impossible experiences once reserved for PC. So it's ultimately going to be up to the game developers and how they wish to use the hardware. But the baseline, the main thing you're going to get from your next gen console is going to be 4K HDR 60 FPS with ray tracing, which is great. All right, 120 hertz. Look, if you just hard pressed for 120 hertz gaming experience on a next gen console, man, be my guest. Go out there, spend that money. All right. My motivation for getting a new TV this year had nothing to do with gaming. I actually want the Vizio P Series Quantum X because of its brightness, right? Its brightness, its HDR, and basically I will be running most of my games. I want to see 4K HDR ray tracing at a locked 60 FPS. I want a locked native 4K, right? No dynamic resolution, native 4K, locked 60 FPS with ray tracing and HDR. That is next gen to me. The whole 120 hertz thing or 120 frames thing, I mean, hey, if they pull it off, they pull it off, but that's not my motivation, man. Most of your games are going to be 60 FPS. All right. And now I'm going to go over to the Xbox One X and I'm going to show you exactly what that's going to look like. All right. I'm going to show you what I expect the next gen console experience to be. All right, let's get into it. All right. We are on the Xbox One X and I am going to show you exactly what next gen graphics and what you can expect from the next gen consoles. Now this is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. All right. If you go into the settings, you have different modes that you can play in. You have enriched visuals mode, you have high frame rate mode, and you have high resolution mode. All right. Enriched visuals will give you the best visual experience at the cost of your frame rate. All right. So when these games are being made, game developers have to decide if they're going to prioritize the visuals or if they're going to prioritize the performance. So in this game, if you go for enriched visuals, it will look stunning. All right. I'm just slow panning, but all of the textures, everything just looks stunning. And that's at the cost of the frame rate. So I'm just going to do some panning shots. And then I'm going to do that in slow motion so you can see the judder of 30 FPS. And this is a 60 hertz panel. I don't care if it was a 120 hertz panel. 30 FPS is 30 FPS. Okay. Your TV is only going to display what you put into it. I'm going to do this slow motion thing right now and then we'll get back into it. All right, so if you saw that background, you could see the judder, you can see how it's just jerking across the screen. All right, but this is enriched visuals. Now you also have an option to lower your resolution, right, to 1080p, lower your resolution and go for high frame rate mode. So it's a softer image, it's in 1080p, it is not running in 4K, but you get smooth motion. You get a smooth 60 FPS, right? And I don't care if you got a 120 hertz panel, 60 FPS is 60 FPS. All right. Now the motion is fluid and smooth. I'm going to do some panning shots. Y'all can look at that same background and you'll see the difference in the 30 FPS and the 60 FPS. and then I'm gonna play the 30 FPS in slow motion again, and then I'm gonna play the 60 FPS again in slow motion right behind it, and then we'll go ahead and close this video out with a little bit of discussion. Alright, so as you can see, at 60 FPS, it's a lot more fluid. And what you're gonna get from your next gen console, which is gonna make it amazing, what's gonna make it dope, right? The main thing that you could look for and get from your next gen console is to be able to have this enriched visual mode run in 60 FPS, right? So you can have the best visuals, right? No need for dynamic resolution, no need for scaling it back to 1080p to get 60 FPS. The main thing you're gonna get from next gen consoles is to be able to run these enriched visuals, high fidelity graphics, right? 4K native, ray tracing, HDR in a smooth, buttery 60 FPS. Because right now, even though the game looks amazing, I gotta run it at 30 FPS because of the hardware limitation. So the next gen console will actually be able to give you these enriched visuals, high fidelity graphics, running at a smooth 60 FPS. That's next gen gaming. So if I was gonna suggest what TV to get for next gen consoles, if you get a 60 hertz TV, you're good. If you want to get a 120 hertz TV because of those little titles that sprinkled in, and you know, titles that may come out in the future that you really don't know what the game developers are going to do, go for it if your budget will allow you to do that. But for all of y'all out there that are dead set on getting the next gen consoles, you do not have to spend a whole bunch of money getting a brand new TV. Some of y'all already got amazing 4K HDR TVs, all right? The console is gonna be able to display these 4K graphics at 60 FPS, and that's all you need. If I was actually trying to buy a TV for next gen, I try to get the TV that will give me the best HDR experience, the TV with the best visuals, because the frame rates are going to be locked. Most of them are going to be locked at 60, and you'll be able to get buttery motion with amazing visuals. All right, so that's the video, man. I hope that I helped y'all with y'all's decision making as far as what TV to get for next gen consoles. It is not that deep. I truly believe that the aim for next gen is to be able to have the best visuals and a buttery 60 FPS. And those titles that will be running at 120 FPS on the PS5, you already see those will be running at lower resolutions, right? On the Xbox Series X, you will be able to get some 4K titles running at 120 FPS with ray tracing. That's what it says. We've yet to see that. But as far as your PS5 and your Xbox Series X, I feel like if you have a TV already that does 4K very well, I think you're pretty much good to go. All right. If you do not have a 4K TV, I would go out there and find a TV that's going to give you the best visual experience. Give you the best visuals. That's what you want. Because most of your games are going to be running at 60 FPS. All right. So, again, that's the video. I hope that helped y'all out. And until the next time, man. Thanks for watching.